My name is John Bowsden. 18 months ago I was not able to play Sudoku. Now I do not find that there are any puzzles that I cannot solve within a short space of time, approximately half an hour. One of the reasons that I'm able to do that is I've worked out an annotation method that I have not seen anybody else use, which is not based on candidates, which allows me to see what numbers go where in a very short space of time. I'd like to show you that method now. Here's a puzzle from a book by Will Shorts which is marked Beware Very Challenging. Will Shorts' puzzles I've found are the most demanding so far that I've been able to locate. So let's start with this puzzle. The obvious one to put in first would be the 9. Here, no need to explain why that is true. Now, the next step that I would take is I would go through the numbers from in these 3 squares here, and I'm working up through the numbers, and I'm not going to do anything for 4, you'll see why in a moment. When I get to 5, I can see that since there's a 5 here and a 5 here, there must be a 5 here or here. And the way that I will express that is put a small 5 here and a small 5 here. That is the essence of my annotation method, and you'll see why it's so useful shortly. Okay, moving on to the next 3 squares. This one, and this one, I'm going to go through the numbers in the same way. Let's start with the 5. There's a 5 in this row and a 5 in this row. That means that there's a 5 here or here. I would express that by putting a 5 across the line between the 2 squares like that. Now let's take 6. There's a 6 in this row and a 6 in this row. That means that there must be a 6 in one of these 2 squares. That means that these 2 squares, here and here, are either 5 and 6 or 6 and 5. And I express that like that. Now that I know that these 2 squares are 5 and 6, I can now look at this 1 here and know that it can't be in these 3 squares and it can't be in these 3 squares, so it has to be here. So I'm going to put a 1 here and a 1 here. Okay, we've moved on a little bit further in this puzzle. I'm still dealing with these 3 squares here. You'll see that this row here we have most of the numbers, so now I'm just going to look at the 3 numbers remaining, which are 2, 3 and 7. There's a 2 here. That means that there has to be a 2 here or here. There are no 3s or 7s covering these 3 squares. The next thing I want to show you is just a mild variation of that annotation method, and I'm going to be talking about the 9 in this square, and this square. You can see there's a 9 here and there's a 9 here. That means that there must be a 9 here, here or here. And the way that I express that is I put a small 9 at the top of this square here in the middle, and that indicates that this or this is a 9. Okay, we've moved on a little bit, and I'm now going to be taking an interest in this square here. Now you can see that because there's a 2 here, there has to be a 2 here. That means that I can erase this 9 and replace it with a 2 and a 9 across these 2 squares, which are either 2 and 9 or 9 and 2. Now that I know that these 3 squares are 3, 7 and 8, which I'm going to write like this: 3, 7, 8. Now that I know that these 3 squares are 8, I know that in this row, this column here, the remaining numbers are 1, 5 and 6. 1, 5 and 6. I can see that there's a 5 and a 6 here, so that means that this number here must be a 1. It also means that this number here is either a 5 and a 6, and this number here is a 5 and a 6. I'm going to express that because it's crossing one of these larger squares here. I'm going to put the 5 here and put a circle over it, and put the 6 here and put a circle under it. That means that there's a relationship between this square and this square. This is either a 5 and a 6, and this is either a 5 and a 6. Now observe this square here. Because I have put a 1 on this square and in this square, I know this square is either a 1 or this square is a 1. This square cannot be a 1 because it's either a 5 and a 6. Now I erase the 1 and the 1 and replace this square with a 1. That is, in a nutshell, the advantage of my annotation method, because I recorded that simple relationship between those two squares. I'm going to show you something similar in this square here now. You can see that we have 4 numbers filled in, and coming down this column here we have the 5 and a 6, which are missing in these squares, these numbers here. So I can write down a 5 here and a 6 here, and now I know that the remaining numbers here are, let me see, 2, 3 and 9. So I'm going to erase that little 9 there and write a 2, a 3 and a 9 in a similar way to I wrote the 3 and the 7 and the 8 here. And that leaves, let me see, 1, 4 and 7 to go in this column. Now there's a 4 here and a 4 here, so that must be a 4 here. It's the only place for that 4. And these two numbers are either 1 and 7. So if you remember, the way I'm going to indicate that is by writing 1. Okay, we've moved along quite a long way in this puzzle using the same techniques that I've already showed you. Now we've reached a point where we need to go to a slightly lower level that I want to show you, and I'm going to be working through each row at a time and finding out the squares that have connections with each other. So let's take this row here, and you will see that there is a 1 either here or here, and I'm going to express that in the same way that I showed you before, with a 1 and a circle around it to the left and a 1 and a circle around it to the right. And now I'm going to move to the next row here, and you'll see that there's the same relationship. There has to be a 1 here, and there also has to be a 1 here, and I'll show that in the same way. However, there's another number, an 8 here, that is either in this square or in this square. And I just want to show you the way of expressing that. I'm going to put an 8 here, and I'm going to put a square around it, and I'm going to put a square around it on the other side. So I just wanted to show you that. If you have 3, you can think of some other variation of that style. Okay, so I've moved through all of the rows along here in the same way I just described to you, and the columns along here. I've reached this column here, and now we've reached the point after which this puzzle is not going to present much of a challenge any longer. But let me show you how I get to that point. First of all, we're going to find that there's a 1 either here or here. I'll express that in the usual way. The next number that we're going to find of interest in this row column is a 6. Now, a 6 can either be here or here. So I'll show that as I showed you before, with a square here and a square here. And now let's think where an 8 might go. An 8 can go here, and it might go here. So in other words, there's got to be a 6 or an 8 here. In other words, we've discovered a pair. And I'm going to show that in the same way that I did before, with the 6 up there as before, and an 8 there. Now that we know that there's a pair here, that must mean that this cannot be a 1. So I'm going to erase that 1 here, and that means that this number here now has to be a 1, and the number below is a 2, because it was a 1-2 pair before. I'm going to erase this 1 here, because it can't be a 1, because it's either a 6 or an 8. So that means that there must be a 1 here. We also know that there's a 1 here, because it can't be a 6 or an 8, as I described before. Okay. And as I say, pretty much from this moment on, this puzzle becomes fairly conventionally easy, so I'll just show you the finished product in one moment. So here is the finished puzzle, and I have the answer book open, and I can tell you that it checks out. I hope you'll try my annotation method. I think you'll find it enjoyable, and I'm sure that it will improve your Sudoku game no end. Good luck.